Welcome to the Psychology Lab. Today, we're diving into a really cool practical explainer on how to officially assess individual learning styles. I'm your host, and we're going to step into the shoes of researchers right now to figure out exactly how people take in and process new information. We've got our experimental setup dialed in, our materials prepped, and a fantastic volunteer ready to help us demonstrate the whole procedure. Let's kick things off by observing our volunteer here. Imagine we're teaching her a brand new concept. We show her a complex diagram, give her a spoken lecture, hand her some written text, and then ask her to do a hands-on activity. It really brings up a massive scientific question, doesn't it? Do we all prefer to learn in the exact same way? Does she process that visual diagram with the same ease as she does the written text? Well, psychology tells us the short answer is no. A learning style refers specifically to an individual's preferred way of receiving information, and today we're going to measure exactly what that looks like in a laboratory setting. So that brings us straight to our main goal for today's lab practical. Our aim is to figure out the learning style preference of an individual using a very specific, validated clinical tool called the VARK questionnaire. We're not just guessing here. We're using a structured inventory to pinpoint her exact sensory preferences by seeing how she reacts to everyday situations. To do this right, we're going to follow a strict experimental protocol today. We'll start with an intro to VARK, jump into the practical methodology, conduct the questionnaire, score the responses, interpret those results, and finish up with a conclusion and discussion. All right, Section 1, Introduction to VARK. Let's get right into it. The VARK model breaks down into 4 specific sensory modalities. That V, it stands for visual. This identifies a preference for processing information when it's presented graphically. If our volunteer is a highly visual learner, she's going to learn best through things like maps, diagrams, charts, and flowcharts. It's literally all about seeing the shape and structure of the data rather than just staring at a wall of text. Next up, we have A for oral, which points to a preference for verbal interaction. And what's really fascinating here is it's not just about passively sitting and listening to a lecture. An oral learner learns best by hearing the info, sure, but also by speaking it and discussing it out loud. They absolutely need that verbal back and forth to cement a concept in their brains. Moving right along, the R stands for read/write. As you might guess, this person thrives on text. If our volunteer leans this way, you're going to see her constantly reading, writing down extensive notes, making detailed lists, and just naturally gravitating toward written words over a chart or a conversation. And finally, we hit K for kinesthetic. This is your classic hands-on learner. They have a strong preference for practical application. It means they learn by physically experiencing or demonstrating the concept themselves. They need the practice, the real-life examples. They want to get in there, get their hands dirty, and actually do the activity to truly understand it. Let's move straight into Section 2, the practical methodology. For this assessment, our lab requirements are actually wonderfully straightforward, which is great because it minimizes any experimental distractions. We literally just need the official VARK questionnaire, some basic writing materials for our volunteer, and the official scoring sheet to tally up our data later on. Now, as the instructor leading this practical, I've got to follow some precise procedural steps. Step 1 is absolutely crucial: establish rapport. We want our volunteer feeling completely comfortable and acting naturally. Step 2, we explain the purpose and instructions super clearly. Only when we're sure she knows what's expected do we move to Step 3, handing over the VARK questionnaire, and Step 4, asking her to read each everyday situation really carefully. Okay, Section 3, conducting the questionnaire. Taking a closer look at the materials on our desk, you'll see we're using VARK questionnaire version 8.01. This specific version gives the participant 16 distinct questions. And what's really cool is that these aren't some dry, abstract academic puzzles. They depict super relatable, everyday situations specifically designed to draw out her natural behavioral preferences. Before she even picks up her pen, we have to lay out the ground rules. Each question has 4 possible responses, matching up with V, A, R, and K. She needs to pick the option that best describes what she'd do. But here's the absolute most important point: there are no right or wrong answers here. None. This is just an assessment of preference. And if more than one option accurately describes her natural reaction, she can totally select multiple responses for a single question. Now for Section 4, scoring the responses. So our volunteer hands back her completed paper, and this is where the raw data turns into measurable metrics. Using the VARK scoring chart, Every single response she chose is converted into one of the 4 categories. We systematically go through the whole questionnaire, tallying up the exact frequency of her V, A, R, and K choices. Which brings us right to Section 5, interpreting the results. We take those 4 totals and map them directly onto the final result profile to visualize her specific scoring pattern. Notice how we're looking at the entire configuration here, the relationship between all 4 scores, not just one isolated number. The whole pattern is what really matters. Now, because this is a proper lab demonstration, we're leaving the actual numerical fields blank to show you the framework. We never fabricate participant data in a real experiment. When you look at a completed profile, that highest numerical score, that indicates the individual's strongest learning preference across all the modalities. That single dominant score points us toward the primary, go-to way a person prefers to take in and process new information. And finally, Section 6, conclusion and discussion. When analyzing these VARK scores, we're searching for a clear preference. If a participant's scores lean heavily toward visual, we know they absolutely gravitate toward graphical representations. They want things drawn out. On the flip side, if their strongest score is oral, it points to a deep preference for listening and verbal interaction. They literally need to talk it through to fully grasp it. Now, if we see dominant scores in the read/write category, that points straight to a love of text-heavy information. Think reading manuals or taking super detailed notes. And if kinesthetic takes the top spot, we're looking at someone who thrives on practical experience and physical demonstration. They just have to dive right in and physically do it to learn effectively. But it's actually super common that a profile isn't just skewed toward one single letter. If our volunteer displays strong, relatively equal scores across 2 or more categories, she's considered multimodal. This basically means she relies on a really flexible combination of learning styles depending on the situation, rather than just being locked into one. So, to wrap up our lab practical today, we've seen exactly how the VARK questionnaire provides a clear indication of preferred learning modalities, all based entirely on that pattern of V, A, R, and K scores. We've walked through the setup, the strict methodology, the scoring, and the interpretation alongside our volunteer. But as we finish up this explainer, it leaves us with one incredibly fascinating question for you to think about. If you were the volunteer sitting in our psychology lab today taking this exact same assessment, what would your own pattern reveal about you?